Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to writegoodbooks.com.
Hello, and welcome to Write Good Books. And this is Scott Childers. Like Jason last time, I'm flying solo. We hit busy times at the works that pay the insurance bills. So today, I want to spend some time talking about word choices. And we talked about this a little bit just not too long ago with situationally appropriate dialogue. You know, making your dialogue with your characters match the time frame and stuff like that. But you know, since I do historical fiction and history, the word choices I make and what you may have to choose in your future endeavors matter, mainly because the meanings of words could change over the years, and some words didn't exist. I'll use a somewhat current example, actually. Usually when people talk about this, they talk about the change of definition for the word gay. Way back when, it was a form of happiness, and now it is associated with homosexuality. And using it outside of that realm in modern day, the meaning gets lost. People are expecting the current day version of the word gay. Another one that seems to be transitioning a little bit right now is the word gross. Before, gross would usually be something that was nauseating, creating a physical situation of nausea and that type of thing. And I'm seeing it now being thrown around as a synonym for, or to mean something that someone just disagrees with. They're using that as opposed to the physical nausea. It's more of an intellectual or emotional negative response. And so if I'm writing, say, teen or young adult dialogue, if I use the term gross in that manner, you know, that's current. And it might actually be dated in a few years. It may be like the word radical back in the 80s or 90s, whenever that was, or groovy, those type of things. So knowing the meaning of the words now and then really could help your writing if you really want to make it of a certain time. Now here's the thing, how do you find out? How do you find out what's going on? Well, let's take a look at current day, and then we'll look at researching historical usage later. Current usage, I would suggest maybe looking at social media of people in the age range that you're writing. Now, this, I'm saying looking. I'm not saying stalking, okay? Let's make that clear. I'm not saying you need to get involved in some random stranger's life. I'm just saying glance over the word choices that are being made. I like to use Reddit if I'm doing that type of thing. But I also keep in mind that it is slanted to a certain type of user. Sometimes if you're able to mall food courts and just, you know, the people watching and people listening to see how different people talk will help as well. Some people say look at what's being shown in movies or television shows or other current types of pop culture. Yeah, that helps, but they are like you are getting it often second-handed, right? They're doing the same things that I'm telling you to do. Go to go see where people are talking, and then remember, well, they're getting a small sampling. So you could just be picking up their bad research. So while it helps definitely to keep up with current pop culture, do a little bit of your own real life reconnaissance. It also helps if you are in the setting physically, because regional dialects change, regional slang is different. So you really want to be of the place that you're trying to find. So that will help if you're looking for modern day usage. You know, get yourself into the real world and see what's going on. And keep in mind what I said earlier about is the word choice or the grammar or the sentence structure or any of your choices when you're writing. Are you trying to be evocative of current day or exact? Because like what Jason and I talked about earlier on about dialogue is when you're writing dialogue in your story or novel, you're not writing real dialogue. You're writing something that evokes real dialogue. Real dialogue is full of stops and starts with people saying or sound effects. People are talking across each other more often, generally. So again, when you're having word choices in the modern day, you have to stop and think, is this going to really date my book in a way I don't want it to be dated? Is the narration going to be extremely dated? And so 10 years from now, no one's going to be able to read my book. Whereas if it's a dialogue, that ages better because people know it's of that time and place. But let's talk about historical now. Where do you get the language of 100 years ago? Where do you get the language choices of before? Well, that's where you have to do your research. If you're going to be writing in a certain era, you need to really dive in and read and consume media from that era. So, newspapers of the era will show how they were writing, but one thing to keep in mind, depending on how far back you go, some of those newspapers, they were writing like a novelist might write. They were trying to sell papers by telling interesting stories, right? It wasn't just the facts, ma'am. And even nowadays, there are some journalistic styles that show that they're sensationalist. They're trying to tell a story as opposed to report facts. And so their writing choices are the same way. And, I was researching 100 years ago in newspapers, there was some sensationalism. So people wouldn't actually talk that way. Now, it might be an interesting gimmick to write a historical piece in the style of a historical newspaper. That can be a conscious choice, and I think it can be done very well. So you want to go back into that. And that's even just 100 years ago. Let's say you're going further back. You're not going to have an actual record of spoken language or even the case, conversational pieces at all. You're going to get manuscripts. You're going to get, I don't want to call them propaganda, but you're going to get official histories, and those will be full of flourishes and different types of language that may or may not actually have been used. So you want to spend some time sorting through all that. And again, what is your choice that you're making? Are you trying to make it sound of the era? Are you trying to evoke an era? Look at how the words are being used in those cases. What are their word choices? When someone from 100 years ago uses the word awesome, that is definitely different than how it's used in the current day. It is truly an epic, once in a lifetime feeling that it's supposed to evoke. So definitely, if you're looking at any type of writing, you need to be aware that words matter, and the words you choose individually can make a difference. I know some people they will read some historical fiction piece, and in the dialogue someone starts cursing, and the reader says, "Well, they did talk like that," and no, they did curse. The F bomb has been around for some time. So even if it is historically accurate, or even currently accurate, sometimes a word choice could throw off a reader. And so that's something where you'll need to see your beta readers, your editors, those will all help too. So, another thing, I know this sounds rather academic, but especially if you're doing historic pieces, the Oxford English Dictionary is a great resource because it'll tell you when a word is first recorded to have been used in print. And so that can give you a pretty good clue on when words started to be used and how its use has changed over the years. So yeah, if you're doing any type of historical piece, make that your friend, and look at literature, like newspapers written of the era if they existed, after you get to the 1920s, 30s, you'll start finding recordings, things like radio, broadcasts. You can find old-time radio. You can find old-time news broadcasts. And so you can find all sorts of resources for, I'd say, the past 100 years. You'll have a wealth of information, and if you choose to ignore it, well, that's on you. But going back further, yeah, that's going to take a lot of work. For some periods and some places, some people were lucky we have the letters they wrote. But again, the letters are written differently. They weren't written in a 100% conversational style all the time, depending on where they came from. If they came from high society or if they came from, a migrant farmer or whatnot. If the migrant farmer was literate at all, look at those, not just for word choice, which is what I was trying to focus on today, but also how they structured their sentences. You'll find that in some ways people would write in long sentences, and I doubt that's how they actually talked. In long monologues, it would be more conversational. And also, as you've probably realized at this point in the podcast, conversations are a whole lot more interesting than monologues. And with that, I'm going to end this monologue. And thank you for listening. Hopefully, Jason and I are scheduling some recording time. So hopefully our next episode we'll get back to the usual tone and tenor and back and forth as we've had in the past. As always, if you like what you hear and would like to see us continue, please feel free to go to www.patreon.com/writegoodbooks and throw a little help our way. You can find recordings at writegoodbooks.com. Look for the podcast section, or you could. We're both on Twitter and various other social networks. So have a good rest of your time, and we'll see you later. Bye.